She tampered with the community's equipment again, Melissa Dyer said, her voice carrying that fake sweet edge she used whenever she was about to do something cruel. This is a clear violation of Maple Ridge policy, Mr. Cole. I'll be reporting it as destruction of HOA property. She pointed at the small camera I'd just pulled from the vent above my daughter's bathroom window, still blinking red. The thing was wet from condensation, its lens glinting like an open eye. I didn't answer her right away. The wind was sharp, blowing across the pool fence that separated our home from the so-called shared amenities. The air smelled of chlorine and arrogance. That property, I said finally, holding the camera up between my fingers, was inside my daughter's bathroom. The silence that followed was sudden and heavy, one of those moments when everyone nearby pretends they didn't hear what they just heard. Melissa's smile didn't falter, but her eyes twitched. She recovered fast. "Those cameras are part of the HOA's neighborhood safety network," she said. "You agreed to it when you moved in." I turned the device over, showing the serial code stamped on the back. "I wrote the firmware for this model," I said evenly. "You're lying about what it does." And right there, the shift happened, the stop scroll moment. She blinked just once, and I could see her calculating whether I was bluffing. I wasn't. I knew every line of code this camera ran, every signal it sent. I'd built half the systems companies like hers abused. If you're watching this, and you've ever wondered how far someone would go for control, hit subscribe now. Because what happened next turned our quiet street into a war zone. My name is Evan Cole. I'm a cybersecurity consultant. And while most people in this neighborhood worry about weeds and paint shades, I worry about something much simpler. Who's watching? I moved here to protect what little family I have left. My daughter, Lena, 14, the only reason I still breathe in the morning. I never imagined that the danger would come from across our fence line. That fence was supposed to be symbolic, a white lattice that marked the border between privacy and community. My late wife picked it. She loved how it caught the light. She said it made the house feel safe. Now, it framed the worst kind of violation. Lena had been complaining about light flickers in her bathroom for weeks. I brushed it off as humidity, faulty wiring, anything but what it was. And then, last night, I saw it myself. A blink, faint but rhythmic, like a heartbeat hiding behind drywall. I climbed up, unscrewed the vent cover, and there it was. A camera aimed straight at the shower, connected to the same network the HOA forced everyone to voluntarily join. Melissa arrived 10 minutes after I sent her a photo. No apology, no shock, just accusation. That's when I realized this wasn't ignorance, it was entitlement. She was defending it because she knew about it, because it was hers. She stood there now, manicured nails gripping her clipboard, rehearsed composure cracking under the weight of exposure. "You're making serious accusations," she said. "You might want to be careful. Spreading false claims about board equipment could have legal consequences." I almost laughed. "Legal?" I said. "Melissa, this is child surveillance. There are no HOA clauses for that." Her smirk returned, thin and practiced. "If you're suggesting criminal activity, you'll need evidence," she said, pivoting back toward the pool gates. "Otherwise, this conversation never happened." But I already had what I needed. The logs on my router showed connection attempts from her so-called neighborhood safety hub. The timestamps matched Lena's shower schedule. She didn't know that yet. She didn't know who she was dealing with. The neighborhood around us looked perfect, the kind of place that made realtors salivate. Pruned hedges, flagpoles, matching mailboxes. But beneath the perfection was rot, built by people like her who thought rules were shields for the powerful. And I'd spent a lifetime breaking those shields. The camera was still in my hand, dripping moisture. I looked at it, then at the fence behind her. It wasn't just wood and paint anymore. It was a boundary that had been crossed. This wasn't about money or HOA fines or neighborly politics anymore. This was about my daughter, about the house my wife had chosen because it felt untouchable. And now, someone had touched it, violated it, in the most intimate way possible. Melissa turned to leave, heels clacking against the wet pavement. "Expect a notice in your mailbox," she said over her shoulder. I watched her go, that clipboard swinging like a weapon. I didn't say it out loud, but the promise formed sharp and cold in my mind. She'd made this public. I'd make her infamous. The notice showed up the next morning, tucked neatly in my mailbox like an insult wrapped in paper. Mandatory compliance review, it read, stamped with the HOA seal and Melissa Dyer's perfect signature at the bottom. The letter claimed I was undermining community security by refusing to connect my home surveillance system to the neighborhood safety network. Failure to comply would result in daily administrative penalties. It was the bureaucratic version of a threat. I stood in my driveway, reading it, while the sprinklers hissed across the lawns. Every home here looked identical. Every hedge clipped to perfection. That sameness was Melissa's masterpiece, control disguised as harmony. By noon, an email went out to all residents, inviting them to a mandatory demonstration at the community clubhouse. Learn how the HOA's integrated security keeps Maple Ridge safe for families, it said, complete with a smiling clip art family in front of a picket fence. The irony was suffocating. I decided to attend. If Melissa wanted a show, I'd give her an audience. When I arrived, the clubhouse smelled like coffee and compliance. Rows of neighbors sat in folding chairs while Melissa stood at the front, glowing in her element. These systems, she said, tapping a smart display, reduce crime by 70%. They allow us to respond instantly to suspicious activity. She paused, glancing at me before continuing. But they only work if every household participates. One weak link can endanger the entire community. A few heads turned toward me. The message was clear. She played a demo feed on the screen, footage from driveways, sidewalks, even the pool deck. The audience murmured in approval. Imagine being able to identify trespassers before they even reach your home, Melissa said. We're pioneers of suburban safety. I raised my hand. Does the system record continuously? I asked. Or just motion triggers? Her eyes flickered. It records as necessary, she said quickly. Data is anonymized. I smiled faintly. Interesting, because anonymization doesn't apply when footage is stored locally. You'd need a federated network with rolling keys. But that's not what this model uses. The room went quiet. I saw confusion spread like static through the crowd. Most of them didn't understand what I'd said. But Melissa did. She cleared her throat and moved on, her tone suddenly sharper. Afterward, a few neighbors approached me. One whispered, "You're really going against her? Good luck." Another muttered, "She fined my husband for the wrong shade of beige. Don't poke the bear." I realized then that everyone here was afraid of her, not because she was powerful, but because she had turned the rules into weapons, and I was the first person to refuse disarmament. On my way out, I passed the community bulletin board. A new flyer was posted. Beware of non-compliant homes, safety threat. No names listed, but I didn't need one. The ink was barely dry. That night, while Lena slept, I reviewed the HOA's network documentation from the member portal. I had expected basic routing, shared access, centralized logging, but what I found was a nightmare. The cameras weren't feeding into any neutral system. They were sending data through an unregistered proxy labeled DPM LLC, Dyer Property Management, Melissa's side company. She hadn't just centralized control, she'd privatized it. Every video feed, every motion trigger, every timestamp passed through her private server. I stared at the code structure until my eyes burned. She wasn't running a neighborhood watch. She was running a live archive, and if the camera I'd found was any clue, she'd placed it herself. I decided to confirm my suspicion in person. The next morning, I stopped by the maintenance shed near the pool where Trevor Marks was working on an irrigation valve. He looked tired, older than last week. "Busy?" I asked casually. "Always," he muttered. "Melissa's got us installing new sensors by next week." "Same kind of sensors as before?" I asked. He hesitated, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Yeah. She says it's for water efficiency, but they've got ports I've never seen on irrigation gear. Don't ask too many questions, though. Last guy who did ain't working here anymore." He forced a laugh, but it didn't reach his eyes. That was the first crack. As I left, I noticed Melissa's SUV parked near the clubhouse, window cracked, phone pressed to her ear. Her eyes followed me as I walked by. That tight smile again, polite, poisonous. By the time I got home, a new email notification popped up. Second notice, non-compliance penalty. Attached was a fine invoice, $250, payable within 7 days. She wasn't just watching me now. She was testing how far I'd been before breaking. But what she didn't understand was that compliance was her addiction. Mine was proof. Every signal, every packet, every flicker on the network would lead back to her. And when it did, I wouldn't be the one under the spotlight. She would. The next morning, I found Trevor Marks in my side yard, kneeling beside the irrigation control box. His truck was parked crooked in the driveway, engine still running, radio humming, faint static. He didn't look up when I stepped outside. "Melissa sent me," he said quietly, hands moving in practice motions as he adjusted the wiring. His voice had that careful tone of someone trying not to say too much. "Another inspection?" I asked. He nodded, eyes on the ground. "She said your system's still not integrated, wants a hardware check." The words came out flat, like he was reading from a script he didn't want to memorize. His shirt was untucked, collar damp with sweat despite the morning chill. When he finally looked at me, his eyes flickered past mine. Guilt, avoidance, something human trapped behind obedience. I crouched beside him. "You know there's nothing wrong with my irrigation system," I said. He hesitated just a moment too long before answering. "I just do what I'm told." His fingers trembled slightly as he twisted a connector into place. "Do what you're told, or lose your job?" I asked. He swallowed hard. "You said it, not me." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the quiet hum of his truck and the rustle of sprinklers kicking on across the street. He looked like a man standing in a minefield, every word he said potentially explosive. "Trevor," I said carefully, "you installed those pool cameras, didn't you?" His shoulders tightened. He didn't answer, just kept fiddling with the wiring like it could save him. When he finally did speak, it was barely above a whisper. "She said they were heat sensors, for energy monitoring. I didn't think—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "I didn't think it was anything else." I studied his face. There it was, the crack of conscience, the kind that gets wider the longer it's ignored. "You've seen what they really are now, haven't you?" I said. He didn't deny it. Instead, he wiped his palms on his jeans and exhaled slowly. "Look, man, you don't get it. Melissa's connected. The HOA, the contractors, even the city permits, they all go through her. You cross her, you're finished." "Finished how?" I asked. He looked toward the clubhouse, then back to me. "My buddy Carl used to do wiring for her, same system. He asked why some cameras had internal audio. 2 weeks later, he got a code violation on his truck permit, then an anonymous noise complaint at his house. He moved out within a month, sold for a loss. That said everything. Melissa's power wasn't just about fines and forms. It was fear. Fear wrapped in professionalism, reinforced by silence. I stood up, brushing dirt from my hands. "You ever stop to think why she wants all these systems tied to her company's servers?" He grimaced. "I try not to. My job's to keep the lights on and the sprinklers running. That's it." "You're smarter than that," I said. "And you know it." He looked up sharply, jaw tight. For a second, I thought he'd tell me to mind my business. Instead, he sighed. "You're not wrong. But it's easy for you to talk about doing the right thing when you've got something to fall back on. I've got a mortgage and 2 kids in school." His voice cracked at the end, and he looked away, blinking fast. That moment hit harder than I expected. The man wasn't my enemy. He was collateral, another victim of a system built to crush decent people under the weight of compliance. "Trevor," I said quietly, "you know what I do for a living, right?" He nodded. "Something with computers." "Cybersecurity. That means I can see where these feeds go. I already found one directed to her private company." His head snapped up, eyes wide. "You can prove that?" "Not yet," I said. "But soon." He exhaled sharply and rubbed the back of his neck, glancing toward the street like he expected Melissa to appear out of nowhere. His fingers tapped against his thigh, restless. "If I talk, if I even look like I'm helping you, it'll come back to me." "It already will," I said. "She sent you here to test me, to see if I'd react. But when this all comes out, you can either be the man who helped fix it or the man who helped hide it." His breathing quickened. He ran a hand over his face, muttering under his breath. Then, finally, he nodded once, small, hesitant, but real. "I'll think about it." "That's all I need," I said. He gathered his tools quickly, avoiding eye contact as he packed up. Before getting into his truck, he paused. "Evan, if you're right about her, be careful. You don't know what she's capable of." I watched his taillights fade down the street, his words lingering like static. He didn't know it yet, but his hesitation had confirmed everything I needed. Melissa's network wasn't just digital, it was human, and every link could break. By the weekend, the entire neighborhood knew my name, or rather, Melissa Dyer made sure they did. The HOA newsletter arrived Friday morning, a glossy little propaganda piece slipped under every door. On the front page, a smiling family stood beside a headline that read, "Protecting Maple Ridge from Internal Threats." Inside, the article mentioned non-compliant residents spreading false information about HOA safety measures. It didn't name me directly, but it didn't have to. I was the only one refusing to connect to her network. When I walked outside, the air felt heavier, full of stares that vanished the second I looked up. 2 women walking their dogs crossed the street before passing my driveway. A man I'd lent a ladder to last month pretended not to see me. HOA fear had become contagious. That afternoon, Melissa called a special board meeting in the community hall. I went, of course. You don't beat someone like her by hiding. The hall was already packed, rows of folding chairs filled with homeowners, murmuring anxiously. Melissa stood at the front, a microphone clipped to her collar, the picture of calm authority. Her signature navy blazer gleamed under the fluorescent lights. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began. "It's come to our attention that certain residents are attempting to undermine the integrity of the neighborhood safety program. This program keeps your homes secure. It deters trespassers, protects your children, and increases property value. But misinformation spreads faster than facts." Her gaze found me halfway through the room. She didn't say my name. She didn't need to. Someone from the front row spoke up. "Are the systems recording audio too?" Melissa smiled. "Only ambient sound, nothing invasive. It's all anonymized and encrypted." That word again, anonymized. I clenched my jaw. She used technical terms as armor, counting on no one understanding enough to challenge her. I stood. "Where exactly are those feeds being stored?" The crowd turned toward me. Melissa's expression didn't flinch, but I saw a flash of annoyance. "Mr. Cole," she said smoothly, "we're not going to entertain conspiracy theories today." "This isn't a theory," I said. "I've analyzed your network's traffic logs. Every data packet routes through a private proxy, Dyer Property Management. Your company, not the HOA. Gasps rippled through the room. Melissa's smile finally cracked. "That's a serious accusation," she said tightly. "You're violating multiple privacy clauses by accessing HOA systems." "I didn't access anything unauthorized," I replied. "I traced the connections coming into my home. Router, your cameras pinged my system every night at 2 a.m. Her microphone popped with feedback. "If you have concerns, file a report with the compliance office," she said, regaining her composure. "Otherwise, this meeting is over." She ended it right there, snapping the microphone off and walking away, her heels sharp against the tile. People whispered as she passed. A few avoided looking at me altogether. Outside, the air was cool and damp, the sun low over the rooftops. I heard footsteps behind me. It was Trevor. He looked pale, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. "You shouldn't have done that in front of everyone," he muttered. "She's furious." "She should be," I said. "She's been violating federal wiretap laws." Trevor shook his head. "You don't get it. The HOA's insured through her firm. The board's her puppets. She can fine you, suspend your privileges, even move for a lien." I turned toward him. "And she can't stop what's already been logged. I've got backups of everything." His jaw tightened. "She'll find another way. She always does." He looked at the ground as he spoke, toes scraping the pavement. His shoulders hunched inward, as if the weight of what he knew was too heavy to carry. "She told me to pull the rest of the cameras near your place. Said you'd tampered with HOA property and needed closer monitoring." My stomach turned. "So she's doubling down." He nodded. "I'm supposed to start tomorrow." "Don't," I said. He rubbed the back of his neck, glancing toward the clubhouse. "You think I want to? I need this job. But what she's doing, it's not right. I didn't sign up to spy on kids." His voice broke slightly on the last word. That was his crack widening again, conscience clawing through fear. "Trevor," I said, lowering my voice, "if she's using her company to host private feeds, that's federal-level stuff. I can trace it all. but I'll need confirmation, someone who's seen the installs up close. He looked up, conflicted eyes flickering between defiance and terror. Then, quietly, he said, "I'll think about it." "Think fast," I said. "She's moving quicker than we are." As I walked home, porch lights flickered on across the street, one by one, like watchful eyes coming alive. Melissa's voice echoed in my mind, non-compliant residents spreading false information. She'd built her fortress out of fear and cameras. But she'd forgotten one thing. Cameras can see both ways. By the time I reached my door, I'd already decided. The next move wouldn't be in a meeting hall. It would be on her network, where her control ended and mine began. That night, the rain came down like static, steady, relentless, rhythmic against the siding. I sat in my office surrounded by monitors, the glow from the screens casting long shadows across the room. Every display showed something different. One tracking, inbound connections, one logging packets, one mirroring the HOA network's public IP range. Melissa thought she owned visibility here. She didn't realize she'd built her empire on a system I understood better than she ever could. At exactly 2:14 a.m., the first ping hit. Same signature as the one I'd seen before. HOA Pool Net 1. I followed the signal through 3 hops until it reached a relay disguised as a neighborhood utility hub. But the metadata betrayed it. It was hosted under Dyer Property Management, the same company name stamped across the HOA's expense reports and service invoices. I leaned back, pulse steady. She'd hidden her digital footprints inside her own corporate umbrella, assuming no one would ever look. Outside, thunder rolled low across the hills. I put on my jacket and stepped out into the storm. The air smelled of ozone and wet grass, and somewhere beyond the fence, the faint red light of a camera blinked through the rain. I crossed the yard, flashlight cutting through the dark, and crouched by the lattice near the pool. There it was. The same model as before. Compact, waterproof, with a Wi-Fi module still humming faintly. I disconnected it carefully, slipped it into a static bag, and scanned for nearby devices. 2 more pings lit up, one in the pool shed, another along the path behind the clubhouse. She'd blanketed the whole neighborhood in eyes. I followed the signals to the pool's maintenance gate. Water shimmered under the floodlights, blue and innocent. The shed was locked, but the paneling was weak. One well-placed screwdriver, and the latch gave way. Inside, I found a small network hub, 4 routers stacked, their cables leading to a weatherproof box with a single blinking light. A hardline connection snaked underground, likely running to Melissa's home office across the greenbelt. I took a picture of the setup, time-stamped it, then unplugged the power. The cameras went dark instantly. For the first time in weeks, the silence felt clean. When I got back to the house, Lena was standing at the top of the stairs, hair messy, blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "You're up late again," she said sleepily. "Just fixing something," I told her. "Go back to bed, kiddo." She nodded and disappeared down the hallway. I waited until her door closed before powering on my main rig. The moment the routers shut down, the HOA network went into alert mode, error logs spiking across every subnet. And then, like clockwork, a new device ID appeared. Admin Medir. She was logging in remotely, trying to reinitialize the system. I captured every line of it, IP traces, port routes, timestamps. The proof was forming itself in real time. At 3:03 a.m., she sent out a system-wide command labeled Manual Reboot Authorization. Every connected household camera flickered alive for 15 seconds before going offline again. It wasn't just surveillance, it was control. She could trigger every camera in the neighborhood simultaneously. If she'd aimed one of those toward my daughter's room, she could have done it from her phone. The realization hit like a gut punch. This wasn't about fines or policy anymore. It was about power, the thrill of watching, owning, manipulating. And she was arrogant enough to think she'd never be caught. I spent the rest of the night isolating her connection tree, mapping out every endpoint linked to her proxy server. Each log I collected was evidence, solid, traceable, admissible, but raw data wasn't enough. I needed context, something human that tied her to the network. That's where Trevor came in. By dawn, the rain had stopped. The neighborhood shimmered under a thin veil of mist, driveways glistening like glass. I watched the HOA clubhouse lights flick on across the street, Melissa starting her day, pretending to be the guardian of order. At 8 a.m., I called Trevor. He didn't answer. Then, 5 minutes later, a text appeared. "Can't talk. She's here." I stared at it, jaw tightening. If she suspected him, she'd make his life a target before mine. I typed back, "Stay calm. Don't delete anything. I'll handle the tech." I disconnected my home network from the grid entirely, running it on a closed circuit. Then I opened the folder labeled Dire Logs and duplicated everything to an encrypted drive. If she tried to destroy the evidence, she'd only confirm her guilt. When the morning sun broke over Maple Ridge, its reflection caught the white lattice fence between our yards, the same one that once symbolized safety. Now, it was a border between truth and exposure. Melissa thought she'd built a surveillance network. She didn't realize she'd built my case. By evening, the sky had cleared to a cold silver. The storm was gone, but everything it left behind, mud, tension, silence, felt like a reflection of what was building inside me. I stood by the bathroom door where it all started, staring at the vent I'd sealed after removing the first camera. The hole had been patched, painted, hidden. But I couldn't unsee what it represented. Every breath in this house had been recorded. Every quiet moment stolen by someone who thought power gave her permission. Lena was in her room, headphones on, sketching in her notebook. She didn't know the full truth yet. I hadn't told her that her safety, the one thing her mother made me promise to protect, had been violated by a woman who called herself a community leader. I wanted to keep her world small, simple, intact for a little longer, but deep down, I knew that kind of peace couldn't last here. Not while Melissa Dyer still controlled everything beyond that fence. At 7 p.m., the HOA held another emergency board review. This time, it wasn't in the clubhouse. It was at Melissa's own home, an audacious show of authority. I walked over anyway. Her house sat at the corner of Maple Ridge Lane, a sterile monument to her obsession. With order, stone planters aligned like soldiers, porch lights in perfect symmetry. The blinds were half drawn, glowing from the light inside. I could see silhouettes, 5 board members, including Melissa, seated around her dining table. I stayed outside, phone in hand, recording from the sidewalk. HOA bylaws allowed residents to observe open board meetings, but Melissa had started holding them privately, claiming confidential matters. That alone was illegal under community statute. Tonight she'd made her final mistake. She'd put it in writing. I pressed record and listened. Through the window, her voice carried clearly enough. "We're losing control of the narrative," she said sharply. "Cole's spreading paranoia, and Marks is unreliable. He's been asking too many questions about data access. I want those logs secured immediately." Another voice asked, "Should we notify legal counsel?" Melissa scoffed. "No need. He doesn't have proof admissible in court. It's all technical gibberish. I'll handle it." My thumb hovered over the stop button. There it was, her admission. Proof she knew she'd done something worth hiding. I ended the recording and slipped my phone into my pocket. My heart pounded hard enough to feel in my fingertips. It wasn't fear, it was adrenaline, purpose sharpening to a point. She thought she could hide behind bureaucracy and jargon. I was going to tear that down. When I turned to leave, Trevor's truck rolled up behind me. He parked half in the street, engine idling. He looked pale, eyes darting between me and the house. "She's got people inside running backups," he said, voice low. "Said she wants every file scrubbed that mentions her company." "She's too late," I said. "I already mirrored her network last night." He stared at me, disbelief flickering across his face. "You actually did it." "I did," I said. "And I've got enough to prove she's been streaming private footage from multiple homes, including mine." He rubbed a hand over his mouth, shaking his head. "Jesus, Evan, do you realize what happens if this gets out? She's connected to the city board. She'll come after both of us." "She already is," I said. "That's why we don't hide. We expose." He exhaled sharply, glancing toward the window again. "You're serious." "Completely." For a moment, we just stood there, the witness and the whistleblower, 2 ordinary men up against a system built to protect itself. The rain had left the street slick, and the reflections of porch lights shimmered under our feet. He finally nodded. "All right, I'll give you access to the installation logs. I've got photos, timestamps, work orders, everything." "That's what I need," I said. "Once I cross-reference those with her proxy connections, it's over." He hesitated before getting back in his truck. Be careful, man. She's paranoid now. You've got her. Cornered. And that's when people do stupid things. He drove off without another word, taillights bleeding red across the wet asphalt. I stood there a long moment, looking back at Melissa's perfect house. Behind those windows was the illusion of control, the meetings, the threats, the fake professionalism. She'd built it all on surveillance and fear. When I got home, the mailbox flag was up. Inside was another notice. Final warning. Termination of HOA privileges. My access to the pool, clubhouse, even community voting rights had been suspended. I laughed under my breath. Melissa was running out of moves. I tore the letter in half, walked inside, and uploaded the audio recording to a private drive labeled Exposure. Then I added the HOA newsletter, the meeting clip, and Trevor's photos. A single file folder that would soon unravel everything she'd built. By the time I finished, it was midnight. The neighborhood was quiet again, lights off, blinds closed. I looked out at the fence between our homes, white lattice gleaming under the moon. Once, it had been decoration. Now, it was the line between a predator and the proof that would end her. The next morning, I found Trevor waiting by the curb outside my driveway, leaning against his truck like a man standing in his own shadow. He looked worse than before, red eyes, unshaven, shoulders slumped under the weight of whatever he'd decided overnight. The engine was off, but his hands kept drumming against the door, restless, anxious, like he was fighting himself. When he saw me, he straightened. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Not here." I followed him into his truck. The cab smelled faintly of coffee and rain-soaked leather. He drove toward the service yard behind the HOA clubhouse, the one where he kept his maintenance equipment. No one came back here this early, too close to the dumpsters, too far from the polished facades Melissa liked to parade for board meetings. He killed the engine and stared through the windshield for a long time before speaking. "She's gone too far, Evan," he said finally, "and now she's trying to erase it." I waited. "She made me install a private router inside the HOA server cabinet last month," he continued. "Said it was for system redundancy, but it wasn't. It's a direct uplink to her home office. Every camera in this neighborhood mirrors through her server first before it ever reaches the HOA's storage." I felt the air leave my lungs. I'd suspected as much, but hearing it from him, someone who'd physically wired it, made it undeniable. "So she's recording everything," I said. "All of it." He nodded, gripping the steering wheel like it was holding him upright. "I didn't realize what it was until last week. The setup didn't match standard security hardware. It had embedded audio channels, thermal feeds, even night vision calibration. I asked about it, and she told me to stick to labor, not logic." He gave a bitter laugh. "Guess that's her way of saying shut up and keep cashing the check." "What made you change your mind?" I asked. He hesitated, eyes flicking toward me, then back to the windshield. "Because it's not just you she's watching. She's got cameras in the pool changing rooms. Kids use those, families. Last night, I saw one of the video buffers. It was tagged with a timestamp and labeled Private Archive. It had your daughter's name on it." My stomach clenched. The world around me blurred for a moment, replaced by that one sentence. "Lena's name?" He nodded. "I shouldn't have looked, but once I did, I couldn't unsee it." His voice cracked, the confession tearing through him like glass. "I thought maybe it was a glitch, some system tag, but it wasn't. It was a live feed from your property, archived and manually tagged." I sat there, staring at the dashboard, the rain beginning to patter softly against the windshield. There was a hollow ringing in my ears, rage, grief, disbelief merging into one cold focus. "You have access to that buffer?" I asked. "For now," he said. "She told me to wipe it today. Said there was a technical issue, and she wanted it handled quietly. I copied it instead. It's on this." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. His hand shook as he passed it to me. "It's encrypted, but the password's written on the inside of the cap. Once you open it, you'll see what she's been storing." I took it, feeling the weight of it like a weapon. "Trevor, you realize what you've done?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I just made myself her next target. Then why risk it?" He looked at me, eyes raw and tired but steady. "Because someone has to stop her. And I can't keep pretending I don't see what's happening. My wife found out I've been working late nights at the clubhouse. She asked if I was having an affair. He gave a humorless laugh. I wish that was the problem. Silence hung between us, thick and heavy. Outside, the sprinklers sputtered to life in the distance, their rhythm too calm for what was unfolding inside that truck. You said you recorded the setup, the router, the uplink? I asked. He nodded again. Photos, invoices, everything. Dyer Property Management paid me directly for the installation, not the HOA. That's the nail in her coffin, I said. You just gave me a smoking gun. He slumped back, exhaling shakily. Then make it count. I've got a family to protect. You have my word, I said. No one's going to bury this. Not her, not anyone. He started the engine again, but didn't drive off right away. Evan, he said quietly, when you release this, it's going to blow up bigger than you think. You won't just take her down, you'll burn the whole board with her. Good, I said. They built the fire. As I stepped out of the truck, the rain stopped completely. The air smelled clean, sharp, electric. I looked down at the flash drive in my hand, small, silver, and shaking with possibility. For weeks, Melissa had watched us without consequence. Now the camera had turned around, and this time, she'd be the one on record. I didn't sleep that night. The flash drive sat on my desk like a loaded gun, small and metallic under the lamplight. Every few minutes, I caught myself glancing at it, wondering if opening it would make things better or worse. I knew what was on it. Trevor had already told me, but knowing and seeing were two different things. Still, there was no turning back. I slid the cap off, read the password he'd scribbled inside, and entered it into my terminal. The folder opened instantly. Inside were dozens of files, timestamps, device tags, and a set of compressed video logs labeled Maple Ridge Archive 1-6. I clicked the first one. The feed flickered to life. My own backyard appeared on screen, grainy but unmistakable. Then my bathroom window, then movement, Lena's shadow, blurry through the glass. I stopped the playback, throat tightening. My hands shook as I copied everything onto an encrypted drive. It wasn't just evidence anymore. It was proof of every line Melissa had crossed. By dawn, I had 3 copies stored in separate locations. One in the cloud, one on an offline SSD, and one printed as a checksum ledger. Years of cybersecurity work had taught me one thing. If someone wants something buried, redundancy keeps it alive. Around 9 a.m., I emailed a single message to Rachel Nevin, a journalist I'd followed for years. She'd broken stories about city zoning fraud and school district kickbacks, stories people said couldn't be proven. My subject line was simple: HOA surveillance scandal, protected evidence. Her reply came 20 minutes later. Meet me somewhere off the record. Bring what you have. We met at a small diner 2 towns over, the kind of place where no one looked up from their coffee. Rachel arrived in jeans and a raincoat, her notebook tucked beneath her arm. You said you've got proof of privacy violations, she asked without preamble. I've got footage, I said, and logs tying it directly to Dyer Property Management. She raised an eyebrow. Melissa Dyer, Maple Ridge HOA. Vice President, I said, and the owner of every camera watching her neighbors. I plugged in my drive, showing her the setup photos Trevor had taken, the hidden routers, the labeled server racks, the invoices with Melissa's company signature. Her pen scratched across the page as she took notes. You understand this is criminal, she said quietly. She's storing surveillance of minors, possibly distributing it, depending on access permissions. I nodded. That's why I came to you instead of the police. The first time I filed a report, it vanished within a day. Someone up the chain shut it down. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing. And you trust me with this? I don't have a choice, I said. But I've mirrored the data. If anything happens to me, it uploads automatically to 3 outlets. Her mouth twitched into something like respect. Smart man. All right, I'll verify the metadata. If it checks out, we go public by next week. Make it sooner, I said. She's already purging her servers. Rachel nodded, closing her notebook. Then I'd better move fast. When she left, I sat there for a moment, hands clasped around the coffee mug gone cold. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relief. Not peace, not safety, but movement. The kind that leads somewhere. Back in Maple Ridge, the atmosphere had shifted. Neighbors whispered less and watched more. Melissa's SUV was parked outside her house all day, blinds drawn. I knew she felt it, the tightening net. the unseen momentum of a truth she couldn't smother. That evening, I walked past the clubhouse. Through the windows, I could see board members arguing in hushed tones. One of them, a younger man named Hal, spotted me and turned away quickly. The fear had flipped direction now. The power dynamic was changing, one connection at a time. As I walked home, my phone buzzed. It was Trevor. She knows something's wrong. She's checking employee devices. Wipe your phone, I texted back. Use the emergency cleaner. Don't connect to the HOA Wi-Fi. He didn't reply for 5 minutes. Then, finally, done. I'm out. Hope you know what you're doing. I smiled grimly at the screen. So do I. That night, I finalized the dossier for Rachel. Network logs, timestamps, photo evidence, and one final document. A copy of Melissa's HOA email authorizing surveillance integration. I'd intercepted it during her last system reboot. It bore her digital signature. Her arrogance had made my case airtight. By midnight, I sat on the porch, the drive still warm from use, the neighborhood eerily quiet. Across the street, the reflection of the pool lights shimmered against the white lattice fence, the same fence that had once been a symbol of perfection. Now, it was the wall between her empire and its collapse. Tomorrow, the world would know what she'd done. By sunrise, Maple Ridge felt like it was holding its breath. The sprinklers hissed in rhythm, birds cut across the sky, and yet the whole neighborhood seemed quieter than usual, too quiet, like the calm before something inevitable. I sat in my car across from the HOA office, watching through the windshield as the board filtered inside. Melissa's black SUV was already parked out front, angled across 2 spaces, her license plate reflecting the morning light. She was always early, always in control. Today would be different. Rachel had called an hour earlier. "We're going live tomorrow," she said, "but I want her reaction on record. Get me her voice, something verifiable. If she threatens, denies, or tries to bury it, that's gold." So, that's what I was here to get. I slipped my phone into my jacket pocket, camera already rolling, and walked through the glass doors. The HOA office looked sterile. White walls, fake plants, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. Melissa sat behind the main desk, tapping away at her laptop. She looked up, surprise flickering only for a second before her expression hardened. "Mr. Cole," she said coolly, "I assume you're here to file another baseless complaint?" I smiled faintly. "Not a complaint. A courtesy visit." "Make it quick," she said, closing her laptop. "I have real business to attend to." I set a small folder on the desk. "This is a printed copy of your network routing structure. I traced every camera in this neighborhood. They all go through your private server at Dyer Property Management." Her eyes narrowed. "That's defamatory." "It's verifiable," I said, "and it's already been handed to the press." The color drained slightly from her face, but she recovered fast. "You're bluffing," she said. "No credible journalist would touch something like this without proof." I met her gaze. "Then maybe you should have thought twice before storing residents' bathroom feeds under a folder called Private Archive." Her composure cracked for the briefest moment, enough to catch on camera. She glanced toward the side office door, as if expecting backup. "You have no idea what kind of damage you're causing," she said. "You're ruining your own reputation, your daughter's schooling, your property value." "Funny," I interrupted. "You worried about property values after you installed surveillance in minors' homes?" Her lips tightened. "I'll have my lawyer contact you." "Do that," I said. "But you'll want to make it quick, because by this time tomorrow, this place will be crawling with reporters." Her hand trembled slightly as she gathered her papers. "You think you can threaten me with gossip?" she snapped. "This community trusts me." "They used to," I said quietly. "Until now." I turned to leave, letting the camera catch her reaction, the mask of authority slipping into pure panic. That was the soundbite Rachel needed. Outside, the air felt electric. The sun had climbed high enough to glint off the wet pavement, casting sharp reflections. I walked toward the park down the street, needing space to think. Families were starting to gather for the HOA's community picnic, an event Melissa had planned weeks ago to showcase her neighborhood unity. The irony was almost cinematic. Trevor was already there, standing near the gazebo with his phone pressed to his ear. When he saw me, he lowered it immediately. "She's in meltdown mode," he said. "Called an emergency board session for tonight. Says there's been a breach of Confidential HOA data. I nodded. That's her spin, but it won't matter once the article drops. He exhaled slowly, tension visible in every muscle. I hope you know what you're doing. When this hits, it's not just her that's going down. It's everyone tied to her company. That's the point, I said. Rot doesn't stop at the root. He stared at me for a moment, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. You'll need this, he said. It's a vendor roster. Lists every subcontractor she used for camera installs. Half of them billed through fake LLCs. I unfolded it, scanning the names. Each one linked another thread back to her network. This seals it, I said. Rachel can verify these through county business filings. Once she does, this becomes more than an invasion of privacy. It becomes fraud. Trevor's expression was a mix of relief and dread. She's been watching me, Evan. I think she knows I helped you. Then don't go home tonight, I said. Stay somewhere else. I'll make sure your name doesn't hit the story until after the fallout. He nodded slowly, staring at the ground. You're really going to end her, aren't you? I'm not ending her, I said. I'm ending what she built. We stood there for a moment, watching kids run through the grass while their parents chatted, oblivious. None of them knew that, by tomorrow, everything about their picture-perfect neighborhood would be headline news. When I got back to my house, I uploaded the video from the HOA office and sent it to Rachel with a single message. Her reaction attached, confirm authenticity before release. Her reply came minutes later. Already verified. Article scheduled for morning publication. Get some rest. You've done enough. But I couldn't rest. I walked to the backyard instead, standing by the white lattice fence that divided my property from the pool. The boards were wet, gleaming under the sun. Behind them, I could hear faint laughter from neighbors, still pretending everything was normal. I reached up and ran my hand along the fence line, feeling the grain, the small indentations where the first camera had been hidden. That was where it all started, the moment control crossed into violation. And tomorrow morning, the world would finally see it for what it was. I didn't need an alarm that morning. My phone buzzed at 6:03 a.m., a flood of notifications lighting up the screen. The article had dropped. Suburban HOA accused of illegal surveillance and data exploitation. Rachel's name was on the byline. The thumbnail a blurred photo of Melissa Dyer standing in front of the Maple Ridge entrance sign. The headline spread like fire. Within minutes, local residents were sharing it across Facebook groups, tagging each other, reposting screenshots, dissecting every quote. The perfect facade of Maple Ridge was cracking in real time. Stepped out onto the porch, coffee in hand, as the first TV van rolled down the street. It slowed near Melissa's driveway, satellite dish already unfolding like a mechanical flower. 2 more followed. By 7 a.m., there were reporters, cameras, and microphones gathered near her front gate. Neighbors came out one by one, some pretending they were just getting the mail, others openly staring. The empire of fear she'd built was dissolving under morning sunlight. My phone buzzed again. It was Trevor. They're calling an emergency HOA meeting at noon. Mandatory attendance. Media banned. Of course, I muttered. The illusion of control, Melissa's favorite trick. But this time, she wasn't controlling the story. I grabbed my jacket and headed out. The streets were lined with confusion and whispers. I passed an older couple who'd lived here longer than anyone. The woman caught my eye. You did this, didn't you? She said quietly. I nodded once. Good, she said. About time someone did. By the time I reached the community center, half the neighborhood had already gathered outside, shut out of their own meeting. The front doors were locked, board members visible through the glass like trapped animals. Melissa stood at the head of the table, her composure slipping every few seconds. I watched her mouth move through the window, sharp, commanding, but the crowd outside was louder now. Someone shouted, "Did you spy on our kids, Melissa?" Another voice followed, "Why are there cameras in the pool bathrooms?" Her perfect image was crumbling faster than she could rebuild it. The board members exchanged uneasy looks. One woman tried to step away, but Melissa grabbed her arm and hissed something through clenched teeth. I caught it on video. One more clip for Rachel to add to her follow-up piece. The front doors opened suddenly. A man I didn't recognize stepped out, hands raised. "Please, everyone, go home," he said. "This will be handled internally." Trevor appeared behind him, eyes locking with mine. His expression said it all. Melissa was imploding from the inside. I moved closer. She wants to frame you, he whispered when I reached him. Says you hacked the HOA network to make her look guilty. She's calling for a criminal investigation. I almost laughed. Desperation always sounds like projection. Be careful, he said. She's losing it. Inside the hall, Melissa slammed a folder onto the table. Her voice carried through the open doors now. I've served this community for 12 years. You think I'd risk everything for something this absurd? This is a coordinated smear campaign. By him. She pointed toward the door, straight at me. Gasps rippled through the room. I stepped inside, camera still rolling. You're right, Melissa, I said evenly. You did serve this community. You served them up to your company's private servers. The room went silent. You're trespassing, she snapped. This is an internal session. No, I said. This is a public reckoning. You made it public the moment you recorded people's homes. Her face flushed. You have no proof. Actually, I said, raising my phone, you gave it to me yourself. I played the audio clip from her earlier meeting. Cole's spreading paranoia, and Mark's is unreliable. I want those logs secured immediately. Her jaw tightened. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Trevor spoke up from the back, voice shaking but clear. She made me install the private uplink. It goes straight to her office. I've got invoices, photos, everything. Melissa's expression collapsed into disbelief. You, she said. After everything Stop talking, I cut in. Every word's being recorded. That's your voice, your network, your crimes. For a long moment, no one moved. Then one of the board members, the treasurer, stood and said, I move to suspend Vice President Dyer effective immediately, pending criminal investigation. Another second of silence, then hands went up across the table. Unanimous. Melissa looked around like someone realizing the cage door had swung shut from the inside. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The illusion was over. Outside, cameras flashed through the glass. The crowd was cheering now, angry, vindicated, unstoppable. As I walked out into the sunlight, Trevor fell into step beside me. That was it, he said quietly. You really did it. No, I said. We did. Behind us, Melissa's voice rose, shouting about defamation, lawsuits, conspiracies. But it didn't matter anymore. The microphones were pointed somewhere else now. Her words wouldn't save her. They would only echo as evidence. By noon, the story had spread beyond Maple Ridge. Every local station had a van parked along the cul-de-sac. Cameras trained on the community center, where the HOA had fallen apart just hours earlier. Reporters stood on the sidewalks, rehearsing intros as neighbors gathered in clusters, half stunned, half vindicated. The perfect neighborhood had become a media circus. And in the center of it all, Melissa Dyer stood behind her gate, a silk scarf around her neck and sunglasses too big to hide the panic in her eyes. I stood across the street, Trevor beside me, as people began shouting questions over the fence. Is it true you recorded kids? Someone yelled. Why was your company on the camera invoices? Another voice added. Melissa tried to wave them off, muttering something about fake journalism, but the noise only grew louder. The sound of 30 furious homeowners was far more powerful than any HOA fine or threat. Rachel's car pulled up moments later. She stepped out holding a microphone, and a small crew followed her, cameras rolling. You ready? She asked quietly. Let's finish it, I said. We crossed the street together. The crowd parted, their whispers turning into a low buzz of anticipation. Rachel called out, Melissa, Rachel Nevin with Channel 6. Would you like to make a statement regarding the illegal surveillance allegations? Melissa's jaw tightened. I've already spoken to legal counsel, she said, her voice straining to sound calm. My company provides IT support to the HOA. Any misuse of technology is entirely the result of outside interference, specifically from Mr. Cole, who has been harassing this board for months. All eyes shifted toward me. I could feel the heat of the cameras, the tension of 100 people holding their breath. That's a lie, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Your network ran through private servers registered to your company. You used HOA funds to install devices that recorded residents without consent. You didn't protect this community, you violated it. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Rachel gestured subtly to her cameraman, who zoomed in on Melissa's face. I have no idea what you're talking about, Melissa snapped. Those systems were installed for security purposes. Then explain this, I said, pulling a printed invoice from my jacket. Vendor code M16, Dyer Property Management, billing the HOA for camera data management and integration. Signed by you, dated 6 weeks ago. Her face drained of color. Someone in the crowd shouted, "You charged us for that?" Melissa tried to back away from the fence, but the questions came faster now. Angry, relentless. "Did you know about the pool cameras? You watched our families? How long were you recording us?" She turned toward me, voice breaking. "You hacked my system. You set me up." Trevor stepped forward, holding up his phone. "I installed those systems," he said, "and you told me exactly where to place them. You said they were safety devices, but you directed the feed straight to your own network. Don't you dare blame him." Her head snapped toward him. "You're finished, Trevor. You'll never work in this county again." He didn't flinch. "Maybe, but at least I can sleep at night." The crowd roared its approval. Even Rachel looked caught between professional composure and disbelief at what she was witnessing. "You built this place on fear, Melissa," I said, stepping closer to the gate. "Every rule, every fine, every camera, you told people it was for their protection. But you weren't protecting anyone. You were feeding your obsession with control." She looked around desperately, eyes darting between the reporters and neighbors. "You don't understand," she stammered. "People here break rules. They lie. No," I cut in. "They trusted you. That's the difference." Rachel lifted her microphone. "Melissa Dyer, are you denying ownership of the private server where these videos were stored?" For a split second, Melissa's lips parted, but no words came out. The silence said everything. Then the shouting started again, this time louder, unified. "Resign!" someone screamed. Another yelled, "Predator!" Signs began to appear from the back of the crowd, hastily printed. Bold black letters scrawled across poster boards. "Stop the surveillance! Dissolve the HOA! Justice for Maple Ridge!" Melissa backed away, retreating toward her door, but the cameras followed her every step. A neighbor hurled a stack of old HOA notices into the air like confetti, papers fluttering down around her. For the first time, she looked small, not powerful, not polished, just exposed. Rachel turned to me, her voice steady but low enough only I could hear. "It's done. The network logs, her invoices, her confession, they're all out. This isn't just local anymore, it's national." I nodded, eyes fixed on Melissa disappearing behind her door. "Good," I said. "She wanted to make an example out of me. Now she's the example." The crowd began to chant her name, not out of support, but as an accusation. The sound rolled through Maple Ridge like thunder, echoing off the houses she once ruled. And in that noise, I felt something I hadn't in weeks, silence inside myself, the kind that comes when the truth finally speaks louder than fear. The chants finally faded as the crowd dispersed, leaving torn flyers and muddy footprints scattered across the once perfect lawns of Maple Ridge. Reporters packed up their gear, neighbors whispered in hushed disbelief, and the sharp afternoon sun fell against the white fences that had defined this neighborhood's illusion of order. Melissa Dyer's front door stayed closed. She hadn't come out again after the confrontation. No more statements, no more justifications. Just silence. By evening, police cars lined the cul-de-sac. The flashing blue lights washed over everything. The gates, the porches, the mailboxes, all of it glowing like the aftermath of an exposed secret. Officers carried out boxes from Melissa's home, each one labeled with evidence tags. Electronic storage devices, camera modules, financial ledgers. One of the detectives glanced at me as he passed, recognition in his eyes. "You're the one who turned this in, right?" he asked. "Yeah," I said quietly. "She built her empire on watching people. Now everyone's watching her." He nodded. "Good work, Mr. Cole. You did the right thing." The words hit harder than I expected. The right thing. For weeks it had felt like an obsession. Every sleepless night, every line of code traced, every confrontation calculated. But now, standing there with the smell of rain still clinging to the air, I realized it hadn't been about revenge. It had been about drawing a line where none existed anymore. Trevor pulled up a few minutes later, stepping out of his truck with a cautious look. "They're really doing it," he said, nodding toward the officers. "Warrant from the county judge. They're seizing everything, servers, hard drives, even her HOA accounts." She won't talk her way out of this one, I said. He smiled faintly, the first real smile I'd seen from him. You know, I thought this place was perfect when I moved here. White fences, quiet streets, people waving at each other. I never realized how much fear hides under all that paint. That's how control works, I said. It looks like order until you see who benefits from it. We stood there watching the boxes pile up in the back of the evidence van. Neighbors lingered nearby, people who had once avoided me, now nodding in quiet gratitude. One woman approached with her teenage son. "Mr. Cole," she said softly, "thank you. My kid used that pool every weekend. We had no idea." I just nodded. There weren't words big enough for the mix of guilt and relief twisting inside me. As dusk settled, Rachel arrived again, camera crew trailing behind. "The county confirmed it," she said. "She's facing charges for unlawful surveillance, data misuse, and child privacy violations. The HOA board voted to dissolve pending investigation." "Good," I said. "Maybe people will finally realize what they signed away in those contracts." She tilted her head, studying me. "And you? What happens now?" I looked around, the streetlights flickering on one by one, the sound of sprinklers clicking to life as if nothing had changed. "I rebuild," I said. But differently this time. Later that night, I stood in my backyard, staring at the lattice fence that had started everything. The same fence my wife once called our wall of peace. I could still hear her voice in my memory, gentle and certain. A home should make you feel unseen by the world, not exposed to it. I'd failed that once. I wouldn't again. Lena came outside, wrapped in her blanket, hair damp from the shower. "Is it over?" she asked. "For us, yeah," I said. "For her, not yet." She nodded slowly, eyes tracing the fence line. "You think the neighborhood will ever be normal again?" "Normal?" I said, smiling a little. "No, but maybe it'll finally be honest." She smiled faintly and leaned against me. The night air was cool, and for the first time in months, it didn't feel like something was watching us. The next morning, the first signs went up, handmade, bold letters on cardboard staked into the grass. "Predator lives here. Protect our kids." Others followed. "Ho is not above the law." By noon, the street was lined with them. The same neighbors who once bowed to her were now united against her. I didn't put up a sign. I didn't need to. My fence already told the story. Across the white panels, in black paint, I wrote one sentence that Lena helped me finish. "Privacy is not suspicion." When I stepped back, the words caught the sunlight, sharp and final. The illusion of Maple Ridge was gone. For good, replaced by something better, truth. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.